My name is Dennis Cooley. I am the director of the Northern Plains Ethics Institute. We are the host of the Science Religion Lunch Seminars. So some of you know me, some of you don't. The Science Religion Lunch Seminars were developed years ago by Davis Koch, who is here somewhere. I saw him before, with the idea of actually having civil conversations about science, religion, and once about lunch. So it's very interesting, but the idea is to have very complicated ideas that we need to talk about, presented in a way that folks can understand them, and then discuss them, because you're the ones who are supposed to be part of the decision-making process. I'm really honored today to be able to introduce this talk that is given to us by the kindness of Chancellor Mark R. Hagerott, who is the Chancellor of the North Dakota University System. He likes the Science Religion Lunch Seminar. He likes to talk about these issues so that people are actually engaged in them. So I was pleased that he volunteered, without me twisting his arm too much, to actually give this talk, which I think was given in Washington, D.C. relatively recently, including folks from the White House.
On part.
I'm part of it. So I'm going to do the brief bio so that we can get right into it. Prior to his move back home to North Dakota, Dr. Hagerott served on the faculty and held numerous academic leadership roles at the United States Naval Academy. He also served as a planning and strategy director in one of the largest U.S. Army educational organizations, NATO training mission, which included Army, Air Force, and medical school programs. Hagerott served as distinguished professor and deputy director of the Center for Cybersecurity Studies at the Naval Academy, and served on the Defense Science Board Summer Study of Unmanned Systems 2014 to 2015. He is a commissioner on the Midwestern Higher Education Compact and Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. Chancellor Hagerott's research and writing are focused on the evolution of technology, education, changes, and technical career paths. And he is the author of multiple articles and book chapters with a recent emphasis on unmanned systems. He served as a non-resident cyber fellow of the New American Foundation 2015 to 2017. He was among the first military professors from the United States to brief the Geneva Convention on the challenge of lethal robotic machines and argued the merits of early arms control measures in 2014. In addition, his proposals for national education reform of the land-grant universities has been published in the Chronicle of Higher Education, which, by the way, most of you know, is the Bible of higher institutions, and has presented on Capitol Hill and the White House in 2018-19. His proposal is in draft form for a joint publication by the Naval Academy of Science and National Academy of Engineering to be published in 2020. There's more to this, but I would like to get to the talk, so let's welcome our speaker. This should be all right.
I think I can project in the room okay. If not, I'll put the little microphone thing on. But thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Dennis, for inviting me. I am a recovering professor, meaning I had so much fun as a professor, and now I'm an administrator, and it's just wonderful to come back when I can. So I'll be kind of jumping back and forth, pointing at things and looking at my notes, so it may be a little back and forth, and then I put some books that I might refer to over here for a little show and tell that there are things that aren't completely electronic. Can people hear me okay if I walk away all right? Okay, all right. And I can see we have a range of people here, professors, faculty, staff, members of the community, and we have some students as well, so that's a great audience. Well, anyway, I can't say much more than, we just lost the picture. Oops. Oh, it's back. I'll be careful. All right. This brief took first form in 2004 when I was at the Pentagon, and I was working in the office of Donald Rumsfeld, some of you know who he was, and Paul Wolfowitz, and we could not explain why the superpower of the world was beginning to run into trouble in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's where this started from. And then as it began to build out, it was presented in numerous audiences, Yale University at their Forum for Science and Technology, the Geneva Convention, where thank you for the rights of faculty. I was not fired, partly because of particularly faculty, because it was a fairly radical idea of we need arms control fast, and now with AI and robots 5 years ago. And then it began to expand it to think about civil society. But you can't help now but look at the news and see issues relating to this. Just the cover of Time magazine last week was about robotic and AI doctors. The Department of Defense just voted out their committee that included the founder of Google Corporation an ethics guideline for AI machines on Thursday. And I just heard on the radio coming in here that the front line of cyber warfare is the election system. And Bernard and I were just comparing notes about an article we should probably consider writing. I mean, this is stuff that is massively influential. And so probably I don't need to do this anymore, but for some audiences, like, is it really that big of a deal? It's a big deal. The first computer viruses, I know the human being that picked up the phone when the first computer virus was identified. He is at Purdue, still teaching. There are people still alive who are connected to the internet. I met Vince Cerf and I said, can I look at your hands for a minute? Because he was there when they put the cables together in the back of the machine. The man is still alive. The internet came alive. Robotic revolution. There was a time when I was in meetings in my career when we're never going to take the man out of the cockpit, to now there's 80 nations in an arms race. The social media stuff. I laughed when my kids signed on to MySpace. And through Facebook, some argue elections are now being tipped, and the Middle East actually did, through Facebook and other things, and Twitter, collapse several governments, of which there's civil wars now in Libya. Tunisia is pulling itself together. And then AI, learning through much of this data. I don't know, did anybody watch the Jeopardy thing when the computer beat the Jeopardy guy? Some of you raise your hands. I was teaching my class, and my students were like, what's a big deal? I said, this is a big deal. And now, in 2017, a computer taught itself in, I think, just a few hours and beat the human champion of this game, which is one of the most complex games ever invented. The computer taught itself championship moves. So big stuff is happening. But it's bigger in the sense that all these little things do come together to cause what I term a macro revolution. There's lots of micro stuff happening. Think of going from manual transmission to automatic. Thinking of going from various phones, from rotary to touchstone, etc. But when you start putting all this stuff together, I would argue that it literally creates new realms of socio-political economic activity, and we've seen these before, and history will help us understand this. And in the past, sorry, make sure I go the right way here. We just haven't seen it happen fast enough in one generation. Well, now it's happening really fast. And the two things that are happening is these two revolutions, robotic in three-dimensional space, guided by AI at a lower level, because you can only put so much AI in a machine, it's ambulatory. And then cyberspace, guided by AI, that is becoming an entirely separate place. And many of the students know this, but there are people paying real money to get status in cyberspace in games, taking money out of their bank account to gain status with an imaginary bazooka, okay? I mean, for the older generation here. So it's affecting the real economy, real growth rates in the economy because of what's happening here. And I will stand by this statement that the people who are alive right now in this room and other places, and I'm a historian of technology, I believe will be the most important in history, and I'll explain to you why with another theory, that if we don't get it more right than wrong in the next generation, generations upon generations will live with what we missed. Okay, so make sure I go in the right direction here. Okay, I'm still learning the buttons here. Okay, so this is one of my favorite quotes. James Bennett, he'd probably be a household name among historians of technology, but he died at an early age, but he got his one big book out, The Control Revolution, to motivate people that we are all part of this evolving and emerging world, whether we know it or not. Past generations, and you'll see some photos of my family's farm outside of Mandan. My family homesteaded in Morton County in 1885, and my dad is still there. Played themselves out in ways that were too slow for them to recognize until later looking back. Well, it's happening again, and we have basically some responsibilities. In a little memory device to take away, I tried to boil this down. Basically, we have these responsibilities. C-cubed-R. We have to create these technologies because we are in a competitive race, and for the business people in here, if we don't competitively get it done, we will be a museum society. We will be left behind, and there's plenty of them on the planet who didn't get the Industrial Revolution right. But if we don't control the technology, just like the US Senator on the phone on the radio this morning, we may not even be in control of our own elections. Okay? By the way, they basically said we need to go back to paper ballots. The guy from Georgia Tech says, if we can't win this, we need to go all paper. I mean, just on the radio this morning. That's the ultimate control, just opting out. But we got to civilize this. And we'll see from history this is done before. We've got to make this better through law, policy, ethics, like this forum, history, and art. That it's better for those who come after us, just like our predecessors did. But then, so apropos here, is we have to regenerate this knowledge here at the campus. You know, because as my old Lutheran pastor would say, none of us in the room are getting out of this life alive, so volunteer to be Sunday school teachers. We are to be shorter Sunday school teachers, and that's how he motivated people. A little fear. But it was true, you know, who was teaching the Sunday school classes, you know? And so we've got to regenerate and think about, are we doing this fast enough? All right, well, when you engage big issues like this, you know, what are your theories of technology? And we have so many theories out there in the political world, right? There's communism, there's Marxism, there's liberal democracy. In economics, there's socialism, there's free market liberalism. You know, there's theories of law. But how many of you know theories of technology? Some of you might. And there are actually some out there. So I'll offer a couple up because we really need to have some frameworks and some theories to help frame our thinking. They're not perfect, they're approximations, of course, and that's what I want to offer. So here are three. One way to look at what's happening is that these systems all originate from a very basic human impulse to better and more quickly and at a reduced cost and greater distance to sense our environment, to think and ponder, and then act in this environment. This is a force of nature, and this is not going to stop, okay? And once you kind of get your hands around that, you can start to go, okay, so where will that lead us, okay? What this leads us to is realms of activity that are built about this basic impulse. Why I said earlier that this is the most important generation to be alive is in the past, there's been a succession of realms emerged that define our life, but we are now having two simultaneously, and we may now have intelligent actors that aren't human. So you want to talk about a wicked complex problem, that's what we're going to have. What makes it more urgent, again, of why these generations are most important, not only do you have two at the same time, but if you don't take action early, you have the disadvantage, now that it involves technology, that it can lock in. If you were dealing with political issues can change overnight, right? Boris, what's his name in London, gets voted out, Brexit's terminated, and the Liberals come in. But once you start building complex systems, I don't care who the president is, I want to undo the highway system. It's done. It's here, and we think Eisenhower got it more right than wrong in 1956, okay? So this is even more important. I'll just be upfront, no offense to the political science professors, but this is more important to get right. Technical systems, complex machine systems, the politics can come and go in an election cycle. All right, so I'm going to make a case for history here. Dennis may have to put this slide up here, but I've had to do this because I talked to lots of engineers. I had the engineers of the Navy in an offsite, the engineers in the Army in an offsite. And like, why are we talking about history? And this is a famous historian who later was tortured and killed by the Gestapo, who's also in resistance, saying you really have to take a long view of human activity to start to see patterns. None other than a guy named Thomas Kuhn, who wrote The Structure of Scientific Evolution, said the same thing. It's a famous book about science, but he spends the first 7 pages of his whole book about the history of astronomy to explain then his theories of how it's changed. So this is where we're going to get into some history here. Okay, so the first one is this theory of this, and basically this is a cybernetic theory of activity, but I don't use the word cybernetic because anybody seen the Terminator movies? Right, that word unfortunately has been damaged, okay? But that's the word. Norbert Wiener convened a group in New Hampshire in the 1950s to develop cybernetic theory, okay? And that's what this is. And it started with gunnery systems in World War II. We really can't use the word now because people go out, you know, Nygaard's off his rocker again, but this is what this is. Sensing, thinking, acting. You can see the various things that humans have added to improve that, including the glasses that I wear, right? These are about 500-year-old invention. If I didn't have these glasses, I would just be sweeping streets now because I wouldn't be able to read anything, do anything, engage. But it's a wonderful invention, okay? Machine thinking, early analog, now digital, the cloud, now all these things to facilitate our movement. Thank goodness for these things. You know, we have, fortunately we kept records of the Hagerott family, and when my family left Germany, 3 brothers married 3 sisters and moved between Center and Mandan, they never saw their parents again. And when she fell ill, nicht ein bisschen Deutsch, doctor, we have Dr. Berger here, been back to Germany, they sent a telegram that said, "Mother lives." That's all they could afford. So the benefit now that you can jet back, I'm going to ask you how many times you've flown back to Germany, are wonderful things, okay? But then also when I'm at the Geneva Convention going, really, we're going to build systems to kill people at 1,000 miles in 3 seconds? I mean, there's a downside to some of this stuff, okay? So that is a basic theory. And of course, the communication links, we can get into all that because that's where the cybersecurity stuff becomes profound, because all these things at a distance leave themselves open. But it's based on historically looking what people do. And this pattern repeated over and over again will tie into what I'll show next, and that is a framework of realms. By that activity, connecting with machines, it starts to build frameworks you can think about the society we have. So I'm now going to talk about a test case of these realms, which was used with the military audiences, because military history is, first off, very invigorating, interesting, but also if a side doesn't adapt as quickly as they can to these new technologies, they lose wars. And so there's generally less resistance to impede the science, the math, the engineering when you're fighting a war. You're going to engage the truth of the reality of sensing, thinking, acting. So, humans dominated the planet in sensing, thinking, acting, right, for literally 15,000 some years, right? And one can see this is depicted as the humans are doing all the sensing, thinking, and mostly acting, and the weapons are merely leverage, right? And a key point is this hasn't gone away. In warfare, we have soldiers right now. I was just on the phone with an NDUS grad, Spencer Moore. Anybody know him? I think he was a student by president. He's now just got through ranger training. And he was doing hand-to-hand combat training like yesterday, okay? So this is still happening, right? But how do we envision this then as a realm of activity, of military activity? I would just lay this out that in this green space, this is social, human, dominated activity, and this is how life was. You could have farming up here, you could have had craft work up here, you could have had city life. We're going to use the military, but that was where we were for literally 15,000 years until people began to toy around with machines. And they didn't even call them engineers, they just called them craftsmen, right? And they began to team humans with more and more machines, and once they did that, the possibilities exploded in not just warfare, but everything else, okay? And so the blue represents basically the integration of human and machines in that process. And obviously at this point, the humans are doing all the thinking, basically, okay? And so how would we depict this? I would depict a progression here of these SCurves, and I brought some books here, but I guess I forgot the book. Yeah. There was a gentleman here at the TEDx 1,000 Cups talk in Fargo just about a month ago. His whole book is built around these curves. He said a company needs to follow the S-curve. You invent an invention, you rapidly deploy it, and it levels out. And then you need to invent the next invention, okay? And he basically makes his whole book built on companies. If they don't successfully have these S-curves, they will die out. Same thing in the military. So at some point, people began to, anybody see military movies, realize stored energy gave advantages. All right, the catapult you all see in the movies, the galley was ramming, it was all driven by human power, right? Warfare, this type of warfare went on from, anybody seen 300, you know, the Spartans, right? From about 400 BC until 1588. Warfare at sea was dominated by that, a catapult, and soldiers fighting. So for almost 2,000 years, until someone invented gunpowder cannons, okay? This invention comes out, and they have now moved to integrate with machines to the point they renamed the sailors. They became gunners. And when you went from one realm of activity, built around the human, to this one, it happened fast, and it was cataclysmic. And this is what happened. So, this is fun. Here are two portraits of a battle called Lepanto, where just like the 300 that stopped the Syrians, this is the Catholic Pope and the King of Spain stopping the Ottomans in 1571, not far from where 300 was, in the Greek islands. And it is a mayhem melee of galleys throwing hot oil and soldiers just fighting on the ships, okay? And that was 1571, okay? Someone had invented the cannon, and they toyed around with it a little bit, but they dragged the ships with cannons in with a galley, and they were not strategic. A mere 16 years later, the English say, this has changed warfare. When they fought the Spanish, in this photo, or this painting, they embarked no infantry, and they changed the world. Spain was a superpower. They defeated them with gunnery, not a single soldier embarked, but you can see the painters couldn't bring themselves to paint the battle the way it was. The ships never closed. The Spaniards actually cursed the English for being cowards as they just stood off and pounded them with their cannons. From this day forward, guns basically, ships were rated by guns, not soldiers. And what I'm getting back to is the realms of battle change now, and now we are in the realm of integration of human and machine to better sense, think, and act on the battlefield, and that is the arrow you see going here. And I hope you can see that this is a tank. So we're getting into this integration now moves on land, okay? So the progression continues, the inventions, ironclad steamships, telegraph comms at a distance now. We probably wouldn't have won the Civil War if the Union Army did not have railroads and ironclads, just so you know, we'll get to this in a little bit. The curves continue, the dreadnought was a battleship, the submarine where humans could not even go, right? They couldn't go underneath Jules Verne, 20,000 feet on the sea. But this comes together in ways that humans did not anticipate, that they now on land have shifted from human power into machine power, and they didn't get it. And what's the result? Cataclysmic, horrific catastrophe, because the military leaders did not understand they are now in a new realm of warfare, and it led to none less than the collapse of Russia, the destruction of the royal family, the collapse of Germany, the Kaiser is removed, total upheaval. It brings about the rise of communism and Marxism. The world is still recovering from the failure of the leaders at the time to understand they were in a different realm of activity. I have the infantry book of 1914 that tells the young second lieutenants, machine guns could be problematic, but you should still charge standing up, crawl on your stomach only if you cannot advance in any other way subject to review upon completion of the battle. Meaning, we're going to check and see if you charge the machine guns. So these poor guys are reading the doctrine manual of 1914, charging the machine guns. All right? Of course, tanks are built to try to stop the human wastage, and this really collapsed much of Western Europe. But the progression continues, of course, more machines. Did any computer science recognize ENIAC? What does that word mean? There you go. For first digital computer, V1, V2 rockets. This continues. These are air defense systems, quasi-automated. Armed UAV was tested in 2001, but by 2014, now it's going potentially on the ground and in the air, and proliferate across battlefields. And now we've gone into the machine realm, where now machines will fight machines with humans not even in the loop. It's fully recognized that humans probably can't even think fast enough when you get into these machines. So how can we reflect on this then graphically? We now have basically three realms of warfare with ethics and policy that define the top realm, that are different than the middle realm, which are different than down here. And this is exactly what's happening in the Pentagon now. They have just had an ethics group report out about what in the world do we do with machines fighting machines, and to Ken's point, we need computer scientists who can actually read the code, okay? Google, by the way, convened their ethics board and disbanded 1 week because they can't come to agreement. Are we here to make money? Are we here to be accountable? So They established the ethics board, a week later they disbanded it. And I know Heather Ruff, who's on the AI ethics board for Department of Defense, is like, I mean, you're almost as powerful as a country, and you don't have an ethics board for this. Maybe the ethics future will come out of NDSU. So anyways, you can see these things continue on. I mean, the Hong Kong protests are going on right now, right? So it still matters what's happening in the ground. Of course, it still matters in the middle. But how about applying this to larger civil society? Okay? So, we'll have a little fun here. This is human power used in agriculture. Okay? They used human power, slave labor. Okay? And as far as we know, there was no slaves until the rise of agricultural communities, right? Hunters and gatherers didn't enslave typically. They enslaved when they built cities and agricultural communities. What connects this invention with that scene? Anyone want to take a shot of why I put this up there? For all you engineers, what's that? Replacement. Yeah, exactly. The steam engine was patented by James Watt. The first one was Newcomb in 1776, the same year we had a revolution. And for the people of color here, we basically counted you as 3/5. When you think about outrageous, our country is built on 3/5 of a human being quota for a black person. But who would have thought that that machine being invented in England would overturn that system? And that's what happened. The system on the left was built on humans providing actuating power, right? And that's gone on since 10,000 BC. Rome was built on slave labor, but to think our country had slave labor as recently as 100 and whatever it is, 60 years ago. But when this second one came in, literally, it upended the whole system. The state of New York produced more output than the entire Confederacy. The Union Army was built on the steam engines and water machines of New York, New England, Connecticut, and eventually overturned that system. So for the engineers here, the North never would have won the Civil War, would never have freed those people without the machines. So if anybody thinks I'm picking on machines, thank God for the machines, okay? Also, there's a book called The March of the Iron Men. If the railroads had not been fully developed to Chicago and other places, the South would have won the war. All the trade would have had to go through New Orleans, and probably Illinois, other states would have gone with the South. But the railroads rewired America east to west. So for the engineers here, huge implications of what he did. Now, how about here? This is actually the Hagerott family, Walter and George, settled here. Basically, displacing Aboriginal hunters and gatherers, right? It happened pretty fast here. Machines do most of the work, humans do the thinking. But now watch what happens. This is my grandfather right there, among the first steam engines in Morton County. And where are the horses? Interesting, right? We now move to machine power. And look at this. There's my grandfather, 1910. This is him. My grandmother took the photo because he did the harvest of the North Field by himself. It was kind of a neat thing. This took 28 years, but guess what? If you count in the back here, there's about 20 men in the background here, in the shade. They don't have those jobs anymore, right? So, fortunately in our country, those people, so a massive upheaval, back to the Bennett quote. Hey, we're just getting steam engines, isn't this neat? This is where it went. Massive social disruption. Okay, these are now the two realms we have. Still human activity with animals and whatnot. Manned machines, okay, two realms, activity going on. But something was happening underneath that only recently, I had this in brief a couple of years, but none other than the president of Microsoft. His book, he was just here 3 weeks ago. He's probably worth $150 million. It talks about this graph. Because what he and his, when you can hire a bunch of historians, they discovered, explained something my grandmother told me when I was working on the farm. She said how hard farming was to stay in college, Mark. This graph is the graph of the decline of horses. Now it's a little disorienting. The red is horses, and you read it over here. So when that steam engine you saw came in, 27 million horses, 0 tractors. By 1960, there are now 3 million horses, so 1/10. The tractors have gone from 0 to approximately 4.5 million. So you're like, wow, lots of horses went away. What he points out in this book explained a mystery that for years I couldn't understand. The price of wheat around 1900 was $2 a bushel. The Hagerotts were here early, 1885, so they got up ahead of steam, literally, bought land, built farms. But my grandmother said it was so hard in 1928-29, wheat was 23 cents a bushel. I remember thinking, but the Great Depression hadn't happened yet. And when he was talking, and I was like thumbing through his book, what happened to the use of land when you look at those curves? All the alfalfa land, all the hay land to feed the 27 million horses and mules is now going to cash crops. What caused the Great Depression, according to his book, was the rise of machines, the agricultural economy was massively disrupted, and 1929 New York followed about 2 years later. Basically, he makes the connection in his book that the Great Depression, which was cataclysmic, led to Nazism and everything else, was the rise of machines in industrial farming. So, my point here, why you all are so important, right? I mean, this is not a rosy picture. In some ways it freed the slaves, in others it led to the rise of Nazism and catastrophic economic displacement because of steam tractors and Ford tractors. So, now it's happening again. Barry Batchelor can't join us. We now have a grand farm experiment. So now agriculture is moving into the realm where machines will talk to machines, and that I don't think is going to be cataclysmic because right now we have a severe labor shortage. So in case he was here in the audience and we're recording this, that I think this is a net positive. It will help solve labor shortages, increase productivity. Now what will happen in other industries? Anybody know a guy named Yang who's running for president? Okay. His signature issue, which I do not agree with, is the economy is going to collapse with automation. And he's on the debate stage with Democrats. That's how serious he takes this. I don't think that's the case, but he's a serious candidate, and that's his main thesis, and he wants the basic income for everybody. So, if that wasn't enough, okay, the rise of robots and whatnot, we have this happening, okay? That's what I'm saying. No one should be bored of this life. I had some students I threw out of my class. I said, what do you think is going on? I'm just kind of bored, so you can leave now. When you've thought about your responsibility, you can come back, because you will be fielding weapons of war that may upend the world, and then we can come back and talk some more. But I think it's for all of us here, especially university audience. We now have to figure out what that means, okay? And I've got a book here called The Big Nine, and I'll tell you, that's sobering. 9 companies will run the world, and they are the AI companies. And none other than Vladimir Putin said the person has the AI breakthrough is the equivalent of the fleet of the Armada in 1588. He will upend the world. And to assure you, the United States now has a joint task force on artificial intelligence, and it is a full-on arms race. But they're not going to solve our problems, okay? We've got to think about what that means here. So, how did we get here? I mean, this is where science fiction is just incredible. I mean, you know, we really didn't anticipate cyberspace until 1984, whereas Da Vinci was anticipating flying things, all right? 1984 Neuromancer. That merely the storage of information, right? This is a scribe writing, then this is a printing press, and then this is an electronic computer made of tubes, storing information, but then transporting it at the speed of a horse, and then locomotive, that were actually the mail carriers, and now that, at the speed of light. That, faster and faster and faster, becomes cyberspace, okay? I mean, how is that possible? And so, here we are with a simple picture of the internet, okay? This is the actual 1980 version of the internet. Ken Nygaard could give this as an assignment for students and they could probably draw that, okay? And like I said, Vint Cerf is still alive, who was there. And by the way, people didn't know this, the internet turned 50 years old last week, October 29th, right? The first message was sent. And then these are just some of the undersea cables, letting you, to literally this, a depiction of the internet, and AI is learning even faster now because it's getting all this information. So you're alive, you will be able to tell your grandchildren that I was alive before this world emerged, okay, that may define me. It's like my grandfather would say, you know, I was born before the Wright brothers, he would say that. I was born before you could fly, you know? And I look at him like, you're that old, you know? He was only like 71 at the time. But you know, my professor, Robert Friedel, who's just retired, he was my advisor. He all wrote about Edison, the Industrial Revolution, and he always felt he was just like watching. And he said, the day he got his first email, he said, I pushed back to the computer and go, thank God I'm alive to see the next big thing. Because he was a historian, his whole job was writing about somebody else's life. And he's like, no, it's going to happen while I'm alive. You know, I thought he was a little extreme, but I'm more and more I think he's right. Okay. Now there's war. Okay. I mean, bless our governor, and I know maybe we don't like Governor Burgum, but thank God we have him. Since 1865, states have not been on the front line. This is China attacking our country. Okay. This is the origination of the computing power shooting at us, and then the Russians, Eastern Europe, Turkey, attacking our systems, okay? And our governor is basically, we should call him Governor General Burgum, because he's willing to protect the whole state. I've got friends in some states where the governor doesn't want any responsibility. If NDSU goes down in flames, that's the NDSU president's fault. The hospitals go down, and here's a governor who has integrated all the cybersecurity under one person, Sean Riley. And he's seen now as a leading spokesman among the governors about this. So this is the world we're in. And what does this mean? I don't know. I don't know where it's going. We need to crowdsource this. But some pretty crazy ideas are out there. Bill Gates has said we now need to consider taxing robots and AI. Speculated in this book here, they said, should the lawyers allow algorithms to get rich? It's just like, right? I mean, seriously, think about it. Think about the money they can accumulate. And then you're working for an algorithm? I mean, that's why I hope there's some law school students here. We are fully in this now, civilizing the machine, okay? So to review a little bit, this is the world that's emerging. It's additive though, right? These are still there, using the military examples. We still need people in here, you know, keeping an eye on things. But, you know, this is called Baxter. Baxter brags they will build Baxter. They can build their own assembly lines, okay? And then this is all happening, but you still got to be able to do these things, okay? And so visually, let's just click through these. This is warfare now. So you depict now the realms of, in geometrical space, humans and society, social structures, man machines. This is a totally automated machine. But overlaying is cyberspace, AI, intersecting, attacking. That's the military example, okay? This is manufacturing, right? There was just recently a strike at General Motors. The people struck, cost them billions of dollars, so you still better understand labor relations, psychology, you know, HR stuff. But then, you know, repetitive motion, injuries and whatnot, you know, can still happen. But then you've got robots building robots at dark assembly lines. All of which, though, are connected with cyber stuff. There was an assembly line in Germany that was hacked, I think, last year, and the only thing to stop it was putting a crowbar in the gears. They could not regain control of their totally automated assembly line. Okay, same thing with farming, right? Recognizable. And now this is Barry Batchelor and Fargo, the first totally automated farm in America is what they're building, okay? Connected to cyberspace and markets, so how you do that. Power generation. We are saving lives already that these go up on these icy days to check wind towers, power lines. They go up and look at the stuff and take a picture right there. Before, we got a windmill farm near our farm. I'd watch them go up in the ice and like, my God, why are they sending someone up there? But they've got to know if the turbine blade's going to split. Well, now the robots go up, okay? And then this can be me, okay? This is last week. All right, I mean, it's coming to medicine, right? Especially in a rural state, this could be incredible, being diagnosed by a robot that they can send out their organs over the internet, right? So here we are on this structure here. And I would argue, you know, I would hope we stick with real human empathy and not fool elderly people that they think they have a human being there. And this is where we get into some interesting stuff about, do we draw the line? Do we draw the line here saying, you know what, this is human space. And I don't care if you got some great gadget that can give false empathy to my grandmother, but it ain't gonna happen, you know? But those are things for people to try to sort out. All right, so, but then, to what the governor's doing. Main Street, you know, our governor, again, he didn't pay me to do this, I know I'm saying this, but he gets it, all right? We made mistakes, okay? Remember we talked about that you know, well, we'll get to it. We talked about why this is so important, but we made mistakes in the industrial age that we're trying to back up, having walkable cities. So the governor of Main Street is very much about walkable cities, so he's trying to solve this problem, right? Here's a walkable city, we're trying to solve this problem of humans and machines integrated, you know. We don't want humans walking on freeways, that's integrated human machine space, but there's some cities where it's not safe for a human to be. But now we got to add this on there, okay? So while we're still trying to sort out what that meant, we got this happening, okay? And we have entire cities that have been hacked where all the lights turned green. They did this, I think it was in Israel a couple years ago. It paralyzed Israel for about 18 hours. What a shock that Israel has some of the biggest cyber companies in the world now, because they knew it was existential. All right, so here's a question. Will these be allowed to be on the sidewalks? Right? Think of New York, and Amazon wants to deliver its stuff with a robot on the sidewalk. Are you okay with that? So you're further fighting for the sidewalks, right? And this was a iRobot film, with I forget his name, robots walking around. So the young people have figured that out. I think they won't be quite dead for us. So why, again, back to my point of why are you all so important in this room, is this phenomenon of lock-in, okay? And this is the last theory I gave you. Theory 3 ties to this. So this is recognizable, right? This is an iPhone keyboard. Anybody in the audience want to tell me what that is? Anybody ever used one of those? Yeah. I did. I actually had to write a paper during the summer. That professor, that teacher in high school made me do that. And that's the typewriter my grandparents had, basically. So I was like, clunk, clunk. But look at the keyboard. Why, for a typewriter made back then, do we still have this? Does anybody know the story of QWERTY?
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you know.
2, 3 would jam.
Yeah. Basically, these keys would jam if you typed too fast. So back in about 1870, Remington Rand purposely slowed down the arrangement and typed them out QWERTY. Inefficient. Numerous times they tried to change it and they could not, because by then they had millions of typing books, typists, and all the rest, to the point that Apple just threw in the towel saying, there's no mechanical devices. We have to have the same pattern as 1870. And that's what we're getting to about technical systems. They have a habit to lock in. It'd be like if we still have, I don't know, who was the president in 1970? Millard Fillmore or something? You know what I mean? Would we still be worried what Millard Fillmore told us? We don't care what Millard Fillmore said. I don't get you wrong. I'm saying we don't remember who was the president then. But this is still defining us. And that's why we have to get this right about what we're doing. And there's several theorists, Langdon Winter, Thomas Hughes, about the momentum of technological systems. That in the early stage, you can redirect. Like, hey, that's not doing quite what we want, we need to redirect. If you wait to the middle stage, it's going to get more costly to move stuff, okay? And you are dealing with a little bit with your water diversion, right? Moving the water and whose homes and whatnot, If early on they were engaged up here, they might have had more say, but now they're in the middle stage where it's pretty much set, right? And this program is going to happen. Well, if you wait till the late stage and say, oh, now we're going to get involved, now we're going to invest, it is almost impossible without catastrophe to turn it around. And I've given you some examples here. Minneapolis was the computer industry headquarters in 1958. Remington Rand controlled data, Honeywell. A couple of professors went out to California and they stayed by Moffett Field and a little college called Stanford and did not come back. Wow, what a mistake in 1958. Military examples, the nuclear arms race. In 1962, we all blew up the world. One of the professors said we still have to thank a Russian who didn't push the button because he had all indications to push the button. That's how reckless it was, and after 1962, we started a whole series of arms control measures. Nuclear power itself, I was a nuclear engineer. I was working on reactors that really were designed in 1955, okay? But they were in the Navy, and if something went wrong, the ship just sank, okay? At Fukushima, there were 4 of them right by a large area, which is now uninhabitable, okay? But those designs locked in, and it took Fukushima to basically force redesign. And the walkable cities today, we're still dealing with the effects of where they put the roads and sidewalks. So that's why it's so important now to think about this early, okay? So just quick review, and then we get to questions. How much time do we have? We're already going over, or?
Yeah, but it's okay.
Okay. All right, now I have 2 o'clock. Oh, I have 15 minutes, okay. All right, he said to stop at 4, so I'll go quick through these quick. So this is a force of nature. So there's some in the audience going, Ken Nygaard is what he's talking about, and by the way, NDSU is doing great stuff. They're the first certified research university in the Midwest, beating the University of Minnesota on cybersecurity. I can go on and on. There's a lot of stuff that's happening here in North Dakota. But But we better get on this because it's a force of nature, okay? And if you think this is going to be smooth, we're deluding ourselves, okay? In the end, welfare did improve, but as Brad Smith and others, this mere shift of machines, of steam engines and Ford tractors was a precipitating event of the Great Depression, in the United States. So we should be ready for some bumpy times. You're going to have this series of realms to manage. You're going to have the existing ones. The social humans still exist. We'll still have the integrated realm. You'll still then have to deal with the new machines of robots talking to robots, the ethics, the policies, and then cyberspace overlapping all of these things. All right? A question comes, can humans flourish, like we got to, when they're having all this stuff happen, okay? And this was an open question during the last shift of realms from social, human, tribal, small village into industrialization. A guy named Durkheim, famous sociology, used that word to describe the collapse of values and orientation, the spike in suicide and depression, leading to social innovations like the YMCA, the YWCA, a lot of the clubs we have, to build loyalties and connections. I think that's coming again. The data now is becoming quite clear. And my wife and I gave a talk on this 6 years ago at the school she taught, and there were people from NSA said, no, it's not going to happen. But now Janet Twain just come out with a book called iGen, and she's graphing the rapid increase in addictions, depressions, and whatnot, and correlate very strongly when the iPhone reached a certain maximum penetration among young people. So that's what this is. You think your daughter's, in her bedroom or she's on the beach, but in fact through the iPhone, her brain is exploding and someone's bullying her and she kills herself. We don't know why. We just had a campus in the university system where there was a suicide, and people there were no signs to the parents what was happening in cyberspace. Okay, the challenge is so hard because you've got to do all these things at once. And there's some examples. One, the rise of addiction and suicide. So the social human realm is coming under great pressure. But then we keep reading about this one. How many read about the Boeing MAX 737? That's clearly in the integrated realm of a human and machine team. The software people import really too much code for machine-to-machine communications. And if you read the case, they literally could not physically overcome the diving signal. And now we have several people at Boeing maybe losing their jobs. It's having an effect on our economic growth. Actually, we said our economic growth is slightly down because Boeing is such a big producer because they got the human-machine integration wrong. Okay, so as I mentioned in the little note, there are some things that are just so off the charts. I'm not even going to talk about them, okay, because they're so crazy, and I'm the Chancellor and I can't be crazy, and there's a camera on, okay. But there is an institute in California called Machine Intelligence Research Institute. And there was a thought problem they had that was so disruptive to their staff, they had to ban it from the internet, but some people did some screenshots. So I think you can still find it out there. And that is the ethics of super AI. So for you ethicists here, people who haven't joined the Northern Plains Ethics Institute, you should join, okay? Because you really don't want it to all be on the shoulders of these guys and gals out of Stanford, right? I mean, literally, some people quit after they were confronted with the challenge of this problem, okay? And again, the Pentagon on Thursday, Heather Ruff, I know people, ICRAC and several of them, that's the International Consortium for Automatic Robotics Control, they did get that paper out. So I give them credit that they're working on it. All right, and the last thought is to answer the question. I do believe humans can flourish, but it is going to take the liberal arts working with engineers because the reality is there is no limits where the robotics and these technologies can go. There will be nothing that they can't do better than we can do, okay? And if you want, you can watch a video of Elon Musk at the National Government Association with the governor of Nevada on stage with him because Elon Musk is putting his big factory there. And basically Elon Musk says that. He says, I'm telling you, there's nothing they won't be able to do. So we have to basically shape what they will do, okay? But we've got to do it fast because, quite frankly, the Chinese are in this too, and they carry very different ethics and ideas than we do, which leads me to the last stuff about education. So again, that's our task: creating, controlling, civilizing, regenerating, and we're right here at one of our leading universities. There's a problem. This massive explosion is sucking our talent out, okay? This is documented in the Atlantic Monthly, and this is why I was at the White House and on Capitol Hill. It isn't working out naturally. If anybody says capitalism just works out smoothly, it's not true, okay? Ever since we've had George Washington, they've put limits on the banks. Hamilton, the bank, right? I mean, it's like, if we just let it go, we could eat this thing up. So it's getting out of control, and there's no easy solution. For example, Washington State enacted a tax on social media companies to help their computer science and IT departments. I talked to some chancellors of neighboring states. Guess what? They're already beginning to hire away their faculty from neighboring states. Amazon just moved to Virginia, HQ2, right? Big thing. From community college to doctorate programs, the foundations are going to raise each $300, $400 million. The states will give up $500 million. Amazon will give millions. I've talked to presidents in neighboring Maryland. They're already having their faculty getting poached. This is a race for our best people, our best students. And, you know, I love a lot of things we do, but if we just keep doing the same old stuff, we are going to be in trouble in the Midwest, and it is now documented. Okay? So what does that mean? One is, and I don't know if there's any legislators here. I heard a couple legislators might be coming. They are supporting us, and I see Governor Schaefer's here. I thank him for his support. He did some work on this emerging technology working group. The legislature passed. They didn't quite do it the way I think he wanted it, but they did pass it. So we are doing things, but we are going to need more support. I mean, literally, it's a race for talent. It's a race to keep our students. We've had, quite frankly, 6 digital scientists I know across our system that have been poached in the last 6 months. And a university not far from here is in a battle to hire some digital scientists, and they cannot bid high enough, okay? So we need to do more. One of the things we are doing is I've convened a group to establish maybe North Dakota Digital Academy, which I can see NDSU being, you know, one of the top leaders, and that is all 11 campuses integrating with offering courses, certificates, and whatnot to try to run this as a system, and maybe we can roll in South Dakota and Montana. The second solution is why I was in Washington, D.C., is you want to look at the Chronicle. I propose basically there's no way out of this without another massive infusion of investment in the digital sciences and the liberal arts. And to put people at ease, those of you in existing jobs, you're not at risk. This would be additive. If you're willing to engage these hard issues, willing to teach computer science, the ethics of cyberspace, law of cyberspace, there'll be new money. And so I've had meeting with senior staff in the White House in this Office of Science and Technology Policy and on Capitol Hill, and it seemed to be gaining traction. And I think that's it. So, did we leave any time for questions?
You have some, let's thank our speaker first. The lunch seminar ends at 1 o'clock, so if you have to leave at 1, go ahead, but we have the room for longer than that. So questions, as long as the Chancellor's voice holds out and your interest does, let's run it. Go ahead. Question.
Please, there is no dumb question. Yeah, please disagree with something. I love when people go, you know what, I think it's all a fad, or whatever.
We will disagree.
Okay.
You talked about theories of technology, and one of the primary theories that you didn't bring up, and I think you're going to disagree, that I'm going to say this is what you were presenting.
And could you tell us who you are?
I'm Lana Rocco, Professor Emerita from the University of North Dakota.
Oh, great.
What I heard was...
And you are being taped, you know, that's okay?
That's right.
Okay, all right. say nice things about NDSU.
So I
okay,
would say, what I heard was technological determinism. Despite some...
she's right, that is a theory, the
yes,
social construction is technological determinism.
Senator is a proponent of technological determinism. We can argue about that. I'm afraid that people aren't going to know, for example, Emerson saying technology is in the saddle and riding us. We've gotten a picture of the history of technology, but it is a particular perspective on it, particularly military history. And what we're not hearing is who decides despite the leaders and politicians influencing, the assumption is that technology is just going to be doing these things and we have to learn to adapt. And that really well, we can throw in some liberal arts and we can, but as long as we're training people to do this, what they'll be doing is shaping or maybe crafting with some ethics. But we need people who can think this before it's created and say, why should we create this? For whom? And it's always been military and profit. Not solving human problems.
Well, you know, this book says essentially that. It says the military and the business community must relentlessly follow this trajectory, and the rest of you better get motivated if you want to shape that. So you're exactly right. The military and business will be driven, because businesses will go bankrupt if they don't harvest big data. The military wins the battles, and so you're right. Where's the social?
It's built on an ideology of capitalism, which was also, it was kind of...
Which is our system, right?
Neglected in that. But what, and I heard two references to the liberal arts. And we have gutted the liberal arts at our university. We do not, as far as I'm concerned, need more attention to digital this, that, and the other. We need people who can actually think about this. So we need the arts, humanities, and the social sciences. And they need to be at the core, not subsidiary to it, not a complement to it, something that gets added in at the end. We need to start with that. How are we going to put that back into our universities in the state and everywhere else? So we start with the thinking and the ethics and not add it on later.
You know, if I could, I forgot to mention, oops, my notes were too hard to read, but NDSU, so I thank Ed for what he did there. He doesn't need to thank. The stuff NDSU did, but the North Dakota legislature is one of only 3 in the country that oppose a strict privacy guideline on big data. And your students, Jared Melville, may have written the first digital privacy bill of rights in the country. He's now gone, NDSU student. So in my office, we have encouraged them. We've had 2 conferences on digital privacy and AI with NYU to try to get ahead of this. And Microsoft flew in to meet with one of your representatives, Casper. Yeah, that was Casper, right? Who, at the beginning, most people didn't want to talk to him, and now his bill is a study on a lot of things you're talking about. It's great to digitize, it's great to advance, it's great to build, but what about the people? What about their privacy? So there is some of that.
It's not great to digitize. We need people to think before that.
Yep.
And say, what technologies do we need? Because what you just said is, and after the fact.
You're right, you're playing catch up.
Privacy.
You're
So how are we going to put money into our programs that are arts, humanities, and social sciences?
Well, I actually, and Dennis could back me up, before you guys came in, I said we need to have the legislature also recognize we've got to rebuild our humanities, so we're not just machine minders, we're critiquing the machine. And this is probably why I briefed one of our senators, I won't say which one, on this digital cyber land grant, and he immediately got to the social issues. He said, and a lot of that money has to go to law, policy, ethics, philosophy, because we don't want the Stanford and the Harvards telling us how to think about our world. He actually wasn't that interested in getting more computer scientists. He was about that money to rebuild the humanities in the Midwest because we have a voice. You know, I mean, people don't know this, but I don't know if he's a governor or not, but Bill Lemke, his plan to save rural America was what Roosevelt adopted in the 1930s. If you look at the history, he traveled and Roosevelt spent a day with him and he enacted basically the North Dakota plan. So North Dakota, in the progressive movement, North Dakota was the first state to litigate that Amazon should pay taxes, and the Supreme Court threw people out of the courtroom in 1993. Guess what? Mayfair versus South Dakota, the law was basically upheld. So North Dakota basically was proved right 27 years later. So I won't argue your point, but I have to admit, I think if I had to come down on it, the technology is beginning to gain such a head of steam, we've got to try to really catch up economically, because the oil will run out. You know, we do have to have jobs for our kids. So. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
one of my former bosses, state board member, recovering from being off the state board. Thank you for your volunteer service.
It's a 2-point question. The first one is somewhat of a fun one. When you said the progression is sensing, thinking, acting, I was thinking, yeah, an awful lot of people who omit the thinking part these days. So how do those fit in?
Well, that's great. I left the thinking out on purpose because this was the framework. If you heard my bio, I was on the Defense Science Board, study of robotics and AI. They put thinking in. So I gave this brief, and they adopted this framework. Sensing, thinking, deciding, and acting, okay? And there was some debate, can a computer really think, or is it just responding to programming? But after, it's kind of self-learning and teaching itself games with just a learning algorithm. I mean, it's getting closer to what you might call thinking. But no, I mean, that's a good philosophy question again from the Northern Plains Ethics Institute. Can a machine think or just merely respond to programming?
Yeah, the other thing is that goes a little bit into what Elena has said. I'm starting to get tired of all those views with depression and anxiety and everything, and I really want to run a research lab with all those views who have nothing but problems. I think it's way time or overdue to take care of the health of the population so that they can actually do all those kinds of things. And it may require a little bit of a money boost from legislator into more of the social sciences into the humanities so that people learn who they are and what their role is in all this.
I think the defining, in fact, when I talked to the Army offsite, they said, what is our mission? Because they could see the Air Force and now the Space Force all fighting with the robots, NSA becomes Cybercom, they're all fighting. They said, your job is the most sacred on the planet, and that is to defend that from expansion from here to there. When I briefed the Community Convention, I basically had this slide go all gray with botnets, meaning if you have no policy, law, or ethics, it will overwhelm this. And I can share with you, I was advising one of my students who actually just published in the Naval Institute Proceedings. He was at Stanford at the Defense Innovation Unit experiment, and he ran by the brief they're going to take to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I don't know if it ever was presented, but it was way out there. And basically their argument was, we have to program the ethics and the values of this machine space with Western European American values, because whichever system becomes dominant will either restrain itself or will envelop this. And there's one country on the planet that is building it rapidly. And he said, our socio-economic, ethical policy system of these robots has to win this race. And that's what the Machine Intelligence Research Institute is doing. My argument is we should have a voice in that. We shouldn't just want Stanford doing it. We should have NDSU fellows that are there. We need the whole country involved, because these are huge questions that we'll live with. And it'd be nice if the two coasts don't solve them for us all. But yeah, you're exactly right. How do we preserve this? How do we preserve the good life in the space of all that, you know? And that's where privacy comes in, right? Basically what Jared Melville and his group did is they cut this thing off a little bit, saying we are not going to allow the intrusion into student privacy of these systems. And just so you know, your students were ahead of Capitol Hill, because now 20 senators came together about 2 months ago and are asking basically an inquiry into all the education companies and the data they collect to report where the data is, who owns it, where is it going. And your state, just to share with you, has stepped back from a contract with the company that was going to take the student data, and we are going to keep it in-house and use the digital longitudinal data system that we control in the state. And even be a little less efficient, back to your point, you know, be a little less efficient, but we control the data to your kids and not this bit. So, sir.
So, a lot of people think we have a common, like, catastrophe facing the global population due to global warming, and it's happening very rapidly, and like within the next 50 years there's going to be massive changes. And I mean, a problem that the world has to deal with, like, as a whole and very quickly in order to have a good outcome. And I'm wondering if artificial intelligence and so on that you were talking about right now, it seems to be used for militarily, one country against the U.S., against China, against Russia. What would keep artificial intelligence from being used to solve the world's problem? I mean, why would China use artificial intelligence and it says do one thing, and the U.S. uses artificial intelligence and it says you got to oppose China and fight them, as opposed to China, the U.S., everybody else using artificial intelligence to say, you know, we have to work in common to solve these problems. Is that Is that in the thought
Yeah.
process of artificial
Well, that's-
intelligence, or still at a weapon?
That was this brief these young officers were going to take to the chairman, is that I think it's patently true. I mean, I visited Hong Kong before it left the British Commonwealth. There's a battle going on there right now. I mean, they are, I don't see those in America. We have our problems in America, inner cities and whatnot, but, you know, we put policemen in jail, you know, we have due process. I think there's a clear difference in who wins the AI race, and my answer is we have to win it. There's the digital cyber lane, that's part of that, to create more talent. And once we won it, just like we did after World War II, we rebuilt Europe. If they win it, I mean, look what they're doing to the Uyghurs. Just look at what the Uyghurs, are being destroyed by that culture. So I would say what you have is definitely at the high level, but we're down here still, you know, fighting to see which system will come out. And I think the United States and Europe needs to come together to be sure that, you know, the system at the top is a European liberal democracy AI, which is what the Machine Intelligence Research Institute is trying to do too.
I got a quick follow-up question then. U.S. wins, say. Do you see us becoming a technological island where we build a wall around our country and the rest of the world is in these areas that are stressed? They basically become refugees. So are we using technology and AI to keep the refugees out at that point and to protect ourselves? Are we somehow going to become, once we beat China, are we then going to turn to all these climate refugees and try to do something for them with our technology?
The closest I got to environmentalism is building 2 nuclear reactors, so that's right in for the environment. You know, refugee flows are down here, you know what I'm saying? It's not affected by machines or cyberspace, they walk across the border. So I think these are 2 different problem sets people work on. I would hope, you know, advanced AI could help us, you know, how you reseed the oceans. But I'm back to your point of why doesn't China and United States share everything right now? They're just, I mean, they're pounding their people in the face right now to control one island. And they're destroying the Uyghurs. America did some terrible things with the Indians, but the Americans freed 4 million people from slavery. You know, I mean, and that was driven by the churches, you know. I mean, it was back to your point. It wasn't the businesses, it was bad for business. You know, the churches in American sense, like, we've got to right this wrong. So, you know, we've done lots of things that aren't great, but I think there's 2 clear different systems we would want to win this race and then share it with the world once we've got that. That'd be my dream. But I'm out of my, you know, out of my specialty. Sir?
I'm a retired pastor, theologian. And the big thing I see with what you're talking about, AI and the like, it tends to demean and minimize the human being. And much of your response to this was, we need to maintain the human realm. You know, even with cell phones, we have individuals that are losing their identity. They're losing the ability to communicate with one another. And it scares me to think
Well,
what the long-term range is.
Well, here's an encouragement for you. Did you hear what Google just announced like 2 or 3 days ago about iPhone addiction? So I'm just saying, this is up right now. Guess what Google's going to offer? An iPhone that prints out your schedule and then you shut the iPhone off. I mean, they've even recognized this, because exactly what you're describing, Janet Twen's book is documenting this, that in the end, for people who have an addiction problem with iPhone, you'll hit this thing, it will print out, and then it tells you to fold the paper, unmediated by technology, like into 16 squares, you'll have your days and your things. I mean, so your intuition is not wrong. The other thing I'd say is this book here, if you want to, my son read this book, so, you know, he's in his 29, he said, Dad, you got to read this book. Okay, and after I read it, I saw that it was featured by the biggest think tank in Britain, okay, and it's Homo Deus by a guy named Yuval Harari, okay? I wanted to stand up on the plane going, you all need to read this book, okay? Because what he says in here, back to your point, just absolutely terrifying. I've got 3 kids, and thankfully they all just got married in the last 2 years. He says a company's coming out with an assistant, okay, that helps you plan your day. And it looks at your contacts and say, you know, you haven't called, you know, Ken in a while. You should call Ken. Check the weather. The weather's going to rain. Take an umbrella. This all seems very simple, right? Then it says, what if it links up with Match.com? You know, Match.com is, right? I think 40% of people today have met people on the internet. And it starts to communicate with Match.com saying, you should prioritize going out with Bergen tonight, okay?
Wait a second, I have to say that.
Okay, right? Well, let's say, but oh, this is where it gets weird. Bergen has the office assistant as well. And so the two office assistants, to make it fast, will communicate going, do you think Mark wants to go out with Bergen tonight? And we've looked at their likes and dislikes, and we recommend yes. Now what if really, you know, I'm going to mess with here. I'm falling in love with Ken Nygaard, okay? And I really love Ken. But this thing says, no, don't go with Ken. You should go with her. And he goes, what's going to happen to young people when really, intuitively, human empathy, they love one person, but now the assistant, they've been conditioned to trust is saying, don't go with Ken. You know, he's an older man, right? I'm allowed to joke with him, all right? But, I mean, seriously, I'm reading this going, this is possible, because, you know, my cousin did meet his wife over the internet, and they basically allowed Match.com to match all these. But you see, you're not wrong, but I would just say Google is realizing this, and now has just announced this printout thing. Now, at the same time, Google did this, though. Because one of the things I didn't get into is one thing when people say, well, what would you recommend that has to stop? I would say there has to be like a bar where human empathy cannot be impersonated, that you cannot allow machines to impersonate humans for those purposes. Well, Google, Google, and you'll hear them talk about their office assistant making dinner arrangements. And the algorithm is clearly playing on human empathy, calling a restaurant, trying to get an appointment for their boss. And like, well, could you help with that? Oh, that won't work. And it never tells the restaurant owner that it's a robot talking. And it's playing on false human connection. I would say that's where we've got to start drawing a line. Because I think robots can be pretty good at fake human empathy. You know? So anyway, I'm not disagreeing with your question, your premise. I think you're onto something, and I think even the big companies are onto that. So, other questions? Please disagree with yeah.
Good, I guess this
So what's your background?
Well, I'm the Dean of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences.
Oh, great.
Here in Indiana.
Did I say enough good things about arts and humanities?
Not enough.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's
All right.
You mentioned them twice, though.
We did twice.
Okay.
So we shared that, because I'm very interested in the topic, and I actually describe it as the intersection of AI and HI, right, in that sort of interview. But I guess I have a more practical example, because recently I was involved with some individuals doing the automated farm here.
Oh, right.
Because I have a background in architecture. So
Yeah.
we're moving forward, helping, trying to discuss something. And it was really fascinating, because it's like, how can we do this, and what kind of space would they need, et cetera, et cetera. But then I brought up the crises, like what I would say, that intersection of humans and architecture challenges, is where I said, well, you know, if we go down this path, the problem we're going to have here in North Dakota is once we do this and it succeeds, the smaller communities that we value in rural North Dakota are gone. Once we can automate a farm, you know, they are just, you know, they're only become vacation spots. What was fascinating about that moment is something, it was, you know, I don't want to pick on the individuals that were at the table there, but they were almost like, yeah, but, you know, and they just kind of went, you know, past that question, you know, that, you know, where individuals like in my college could help that discussion, right? But they weren't really interested in that because it wasn't, you know, automating the farm. It was looking at the broader implications of it. And I'm not sure how we get to
Well,
that.
I've thought about it a lot, actually, because my family are still farmers.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I can go back enough slides, but
Yeah, that would be fine.
but here's my thought. This, again, this framework, just so many things just fit in. The organic natural movement is down here, right? No GMO, right? No pesticides, you know. Community-supported agriculture, right? Sustain what makes sense, and my gut feeling is, fortunately, we're within 15 miles of Bismarck Band Aid, and we just started planting an orchard. And our thought is ecotourism. You know, it's got beautiful rolling hills, you know, a vineyard, orchard, whatnot. Once you get out too far from the cities, it probably lends itself to more of the automation stuff. And so that may, you know, go up here. It'll be the ones in the middle, you know, of can you still support, you know, having labor, you know, the machines and whatnot. My gut feeling is that much of it's going to have to move to the high end or the low end. The middle is going to be, you know, kind of thinned out. It's my gut feeling.
Yeah, but I think the issue is like how do you facilitate those conversations that either being shut down to go to the machine realm or shut down to go to the, and I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, no, it is, and that's why, and I appreciate, you know, Brad Smith in his book, that it was cataclysmic for, you know, the whole horse industry, and it led to follow-on effects. So we can't say it's just going to be wonderful everywhere, you know, but we have to adapt. Unfortunately, we're a wealthy state We have, we are the highest percentage of high school kids that go on to college in America. We have a wonderful culture. I was at one conference where they're having law and order issues on the campus, and said, the rates of problems on your campuses and your cities are low. What was your program for that? I was like, it's a North Dakota culture. You follow the rules. You respect, you respect women and whatnot. And I'm sorry, there's no program for that. And so I think we have such an incredibly positive future, and we just got to get more right than wrong. This is kind of the theme of Beer. More right than wrong, and if you're at least positive. I mean, this is how some of these people are so. They're like, if we could be 1% more right, meaning 51% positive, 40% negative, then compound interest, it will be much better. The problem is the generations in the transition, like we are right now, getting it in that direction, so we don't have to undo the mistakes too much. So, and there will be mistakes, but trying to get it more right than wrong is our goal. Okay. Other questions? People, please feel free to get up and leave. We're well past 1 o'clock. So. Oh, there's the one question.
I'll just add a little bit more. So, in this march of intelligent machines doing more and more decision making that has traditionally been driven entirely by humans, so we're seeing intelligent machines carry out medical diagnoses, we're seeing intelligent machines making decisions for judges in the courtroom that determine what the sentence should be based on what the risk to society is for the person who's just been convicted of a crime. So this march that goes on, and it's a steady march. I mean, you've explained it well, but it's marching more and more into key decisions, which are really social decisions.
And I think that's a mistake in many cases.
Yeah.
How fast does the docket have to
There's
work?
a march.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge issue, who gets to be in charge when you have artificial intelligent machines and you have human decision making and the juxtaposition between the two. Actually, I'm editing a special issue of a journal right now on this very topic, and people are all over the place where they're saying, whoa, we're seeing this march and somehow we got to stop it. Others say, we have to think in terms of human decision making and serving humans. It's a frontier, and it's a very important one. But to tell you the truth, I don't see much of any stopping of this march of intelligent machines doing more and more decision making in our lives. And so that's going to be a sobering thought for a lot of people, but it's true.
Well, I think this is why you all should be energized to do something. There should be policy, law, and ethics that protects this part. So I'll give you a case in point. My daughter applied for a job. She's a nurse, and they said the algorithm has rejected you. This happened. I said, ask them why. Oh, you signed this 10-page thing for the interview saying we don't have to explain why. Okay? So that happened a couple years ago. She did later get the job. But my son-in-law just sent me an article where now they have big companies using AI to interview you visually. Have you read about this? How many have read about this? He said people are terrified. You have to go on Skype and the machine will read your face as you answer questions. And a human does not have to explain why they did this. So I was looking, it was a Washington Post article, and finally a computer scientist said, this is the height this is terrifying. Because no one can explain why people will not get a job, and yet it'll be on the record they were rejected for a job, and no one can explain it. This must stop immediately. So it's back to your point of where do we draw the line, and my gut feeling is where do you draw the line if it's a competitive thing that involves making widgets, or maybe cutting wheat on 10,000-acre fields, or robots fighting robots in space and over the ocean. We have to win that arms race. But the world is not going to turn on did a human interview you or a machine. This is where you have to require they have to pay people to interview. The elections, we were just talking to Jeremy about, did I mention the election thing? That right now the Russians and the Chinese have targeted our elections. The governor was on stage where General Nakasone said the biggest national security threat, I think it was him, is the attack on our elections in 2020. I mean, look where we come. So on the radio this morning said paper ballots. I was just saying to Jeremy that, Jeremy, what's your name again? Sorry. Ben, okay. and this is maybe the Governor Schaefer could get involved in this. We should probably put out a policy now, maybe our governors, Western governors does this, that you can't win by hacking our elections. We will drive the elections deep, deep down into here, where if a single state is hacked, then the president convenes all the legislators in the United States. And Rich Warner walks in, and Jim Roars walks in, and they cast their vote, and someone walks up and goes, yeah, it's not an avatar, it's really him, and they can't win. But it gets back to the point that we don't have to decide an election in 8 minutes. Granted, it'll take 3 days for all the states to convene legislatures, but now the electors are all elected, the senators are all verified, and they can't win. But it means you're down here, same with that senator or on the radio program this morning saying you got to dump all electronic election stuff and go all paper ballots. Yeah, they just said that on the radio this morning. So that's part of where we are. Which things do we push down here? I'd say human empathy gets pushed down here. You don't let people impersonate healthcare workers. You know, warfare among machines under the sea should probably be first, but probably not in policing. You want real human beings interacting with real human beings. You know, that's kind of where I would say. Yeah.
But you can influence the elections through social media, which isn't going to be, which then affects the paper ballot, who goes to vote and who doesn't. So you haven't eliminated.
Oh, no, I have, in the sense that the legislators are the ones who pick the senators, not their voters.
I
See what I'm saying? Now, if our legislators can be influenced, I don't know, but I'm saying,
that can be influenced too, is that who to vote for as your legislators through the social
true,
media.
but it just gets
lies.
harder. Yeah, I'm just saying it gives us more resiliency in the face of these things. Yeah, good point.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
Here, I'm a student at NDUS right now,
Uh-huh.
and you mentioned about artificial intelligence and money, and you said something along the lines of, should AI be allowed to make that much money? What about AI is so valuable? Is it like the algorithms, the processing power? Is it the people who know how to use it? I'm just wondering about
Yeah, no, the book I would recommend is Andrew Keen. He wrote The Internet is Not the Answer. I've read the book once, I've listened to it on tape once or twice, and he wrote this 6 years ago. What he says basically is the whole internet utopia was wrong. They thought it would allow all these little islands of wealth and innovation to occur, and what we missed was once it's all connected, there is no diseconomies of scale. If GM got too big, it just couldn't produce that many cars efficiently, right? But the internet just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger because the data makes it stronger. The more data you get, the better your algorithms, the better you can trade stocks, okay? And so what makes AI so valuable is it's eating up all this data and making the best decisions. I mean, it's getting so surreal that downtown Manhattan, there are what looks like apartment buildings. They're not apartment buildings. They look like it. They're full of banks of computers. And they're getting as close to Wall Street as they can. So the latency in the trading cycle is reduced. So it's basically all the data across the world can be collected. And with AI, it can make decisions that are better informed, and which is good for medical care, right? That's what I'm saying. A lot of this is very positive. Hey, you have the early signs that you may actually have colon cancer. Great, you just saved my dad's life. But on the downside is it could lead to breakthroughs in warfare, where one side dominates the other one, or it, back to your point there, Professor from UND, you know, capitalism runs amok, and huge companies, well, we're seeing it. The inequality in our country is you know, rapidly increasing in many measures. But that's what it is. It's that AI can crunch all the data and yield results, which is why Bill Gates said we probably need to start taxing computers. Because the reason Zuckerberg's so wealthy and the Apple people are so Apple is that they have control of these machine algorithms. They own them, their shareholders own them. And those who didn't buy Apple stock back in 2005 are not part of that. So, you had another question? Was that?
You mentioned, I think it was Apple, they're releasing this assistant thing that says you can like write out your schedule and hold up the paper in a certain way. It's basically saying like, hey, stop using our product so much, which I thought was kind of ironic. And I was just wondering, like, what can we do to kind of be wary of that in future generations? Because I feel like with the internet, and I was born in the age of internet. I never knew a world without it. So I guess I'm kind of on the cusp of this like human evolutionary phase, and what can we do to be aware of like how that's going to change and be affecting us positively and negatively, probably mostly, you know?
Well, probably first thing is join the Northern Plains Ethics Institute, okay? And I'm only joking because Jared Melville, a student, a undergrad student, came to me, one of those thoughtful guys, he's now on a fellowship at DC, and said, I really am feeling uncomfortable about this. And we were going full speed. We had a Microsoft executive as our board chair, and he said, we can literally find a needle in the haystack and Chancellor, do it, you know? And then the questions came up like, well, what if we classify a student, you know, I'll pick on Ken again, you know, Ken seems kind of depressed, and so we'll put a little label, suicide tendencies. And now this vendor owns that. And then Ken wants to apply to be a Marine Guard at the White House. Oh, we need to look at all your profiles from college because it's so, you know, and so it's like, you're right. What are we doing with this stuff? So here's a student who had no power, but he was engaging this stuff, and after one conversation, we're like, you know what, we need to put something together. And so we now have an AI privacy advisory group of about 10 people, including pastors, former member of the state Supreme Court. We've had at least 2 conferences on grappling with this, and we were criticized as being kind of out there. And then Jim Casper introduced legislation, and Microsoft flew in and testified for the North Dakota legislation, which is now under study. So you're in the right place to do this. That's why I think, you know, the Midwest is so important, because the values we have and whatnot need a voice out there, and not just being written on the East and West Coast, which right now they kind of dominate that stuff. So what's your major, or what are you studying?
Computer science.
All right. Well, you're the one of them. There you go. I take some ethics courses and some history courses too, though. You know, I was a nuclear engineer, and it certainly helped me. Yes, sorry.
I'm a nursing student.
Nursing?
Yeah. I was told by my psychology professor. He said the AI will never replace humans because humans will have conscious.
Great point. She said, the professor was saying AI will never replace a human being because humans are conscious. And he's exactly right, and Yuval Harari says that, okay? He says humans are conscious. It's something that is almost spiritual. They have a soul, which is why I think churches are very important, because they don't care how much you produce, they care because you have a soul. I'm a practicing Christian, and the churches right now need to be as strong as possible, but they're just so distracted. But what he says in here, it's back to the professor's point. Businesses won't care if you're conscious or not if you make money. And the military must win battles, whether you're conscious or not. And so I think in many areas, like churches, community groups, and hopefully again, you know, empathy and healthcare, we care that we're a conscious being. But in these 2 major drivers, the military and capitalist organizations, they have to make money. And consciousness may not be an advantage like it used to be. I agree completely. She said money's not everything. I agree completely. But we are in a money-driven society. Now you see, this is where, though, social organizations, remember when Industrial Revolution happened, they built the YMCA, the YWCA, the Lions Club, Knights of Columbus. They built all these new organizations to help people situate themselves. And so maybe you should start an organization down here. A book I'd recommend is What Money Can't Buy, by a guy named Sandel. He was a Rhodes Scholar and became a judge, and he wrote a book, What Money Can't Buy, about how our culture has probably gone too far. And he has a lecture on the internet. I believe it was one of the most viewed lectures ever. And he engages exactly that. You know, so you aren't wrong. So. Sir?
So this is an extremely competitive kind of thing for companies, for countries. But we got a lot of work that's being done in this area, being done by giant multinationals. If you're running one of them, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, that's kind of the thesis of this book here. It's called The Big Nine. And by the way, for students, I write in my books all the time, but I write in the front, because if you highlight stuff, you can't find it. So I write it in the front, the key things that come out. He said, basically, the AI thing is getting so complex, AIs are building child AIs and born-in new AIs. It's proven creative and thoughtful. In fact, I forgot to show you this. This is the Bloomberg Business Week. This was painted by AI. And they did a competition where they had some artists rate some pictures, and they befuddled some of the judges, that it was actually machine generated. So basically, back to the nurse's point here, that I think the argument to make it here is these companies cannot in the end be trusted to get this right. And the companies are IBM, Alibaba, Microsoft, Tencent, Apple, Baidu, and Google, Amazon, Facebook. And it must become, I think, essentially a public good, which requires the government to start to get involved, because they can't, because they are profit maximizing. So I think I try to cut to the chase on there, but yeah, you're posing the fundamental question. They have so much power. How can they get it right? I wouldn't want to be Zuckerberg, right? I mean, he got this company, and now what is he going to do to human society? He's a college dropout. Bill Gates is a college dropout. I hope they're doing lots of reading in the humanities, because huge questions are right on them. So yeah, I think that's the gist. They can't do it, and we're going to have some type of quasi-governmental oversight. That's, I think, where it's going.
Well, we'll take, because we're at 1:30, so we'll take 2 more questions so that the Chancellor can have just a little bit of a break after talking for an hour. So what we'll do is...
I'll take mine down here if that's all right. I don't have to do it right now.
Go ahead.
Okay, so basically, with all being said today, at what point...
Do you identify yourself?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm Josh Dreyer. I'm actually here for point of view, but...
Oh, yeah, Chris
yeah,
Burke. Yeah,
yes,
nice meeting you today.
but
Sorry,
this,
I'm staring into the light. So.
This question is actually for me, what I've gotten out of this seminar. Sorry, if I can find you on camera again here. All right. So with everything being said, at what point does AI take over government because of the efficiencies or lack thereof, and why wouldn't we let it?
Governor Schaefer, you want to answer that? Former governor? I mean, he was both, if you don't know, he was a Secretary of Agriculture and a governor and a college president, so he should be answering that question. Why wouldn't you let a robot in Washington run the Department of Agriculture when you were there?
Well, in today's atmosphere, I'm not so sure it wouldn't be better.
My point exactly.
See, that's why he got elected governor. I didn't even know what to say. So, do you want to stop there? I don't put you on the spot, but I don't know how best to answer that. Let the machines run it.
I don't think if government is, if the mission of government is to provide for the education and health and safety of human beings, back to the human touch and the human peace, I don't think that artificial intelligence, I don't believe artificial intelligence today has the capacity to measure the emotional impact that government has on people. So I don't think that artificial intelligence can be in a position to make decisions that affect human people's lives. You could do it mechanically. We could do it mechanically now. But there are often principles and policies in government that aren't mechanical, that are necessary, or they might be more expensive than they should be or whatever, but they're necessary to take care of people. And if you're going to take care of people, which is the government's role, I don't believe that artificial intelligence can mechanically walk through historical information and arrive at a solution that takes into account that human soul, if you will. So I don't see it. Like I said, in some cases, it might be better than what we've got going on today. But in the long run, you cannot replace the human interaction with a machine on taking care of people.
And just to follow up with that, that's based on today's standards.
Right.
But tomorrow always shows us that the machines are doing things better than humans. Maybe 20 years from now, we develop the AI, or the AI develops itself to handle human emotion better than we do. Like if everything, like with AI, everything says it just wasn't possible, has shown that it is becoming possible. I mean, automated farms, machines making decisions on who they hire. If we start putting the onus on the machines, like, well, they can do it better. Why wouldn't we let them do it better than us is my question.
Well, you know, there's a term in kind of the philosophy of AI called the uncanny valley. I don't know if anybody's heard that phrase. But basically, and they're measuring this over time, that if a machine works at this level of functionality, humans are comfortable with it, as it starts getting closer lifelike to a human being, our comfort level drops off. It gets too close to that, okay? And so kind of their argument is, trying the government, is that we have leaders that we want to be human, that make decisions, and we have empathy with them, and we know they share the genome, whatnot. And I think they would say this uncanny valley, like, oh, it's getting better, but it's getting too lifelike, and we're going to pull away until there's a breakthrough to where you can't even maybe distinguish them. You know, that's the Turing test. And, you know, the Japanese are less inhibited with robotics. They're doing lots of lifelike stuff with robots. But I think that it's just humans wanting to know a human, you know, is at the helm. Like they talked about one class I gave, would you ever feel comfortable getting in an unmanned airplane? They're like, I don't know about that. You know, they still want to see a human there. Now, will the generations come where they don't care? You know, because we do get into subway cars and you never see the conductor, you know. So maybe the day will come, I don't know. But we better hope it's ethical, which is why we have the Northern Plains Ethics Institute.
But that's the human piece of it, because ethics come from the collective morality of the human beings. And so if you're going to look at ethics, you know, a machine, an algorithm, a bunch of data put together, you know, can't collectively generate the morals which lead to the ethics of how you operate.
And back to the pastor, you know, that's where even Yuval Harari, who's an avowed atheist, is like, you know, the churches may have a role because, you know, people may have meaning beyond what they can produce, what they can sense, they can act. And right now we're pretty much defined by what do you produce, what's your job, how much money do you have? You know, I mean, we've kind of gone down that trail, and we have to reverse some of that back to your point, where money isn't everything, status isn't everything, and it's about being a human being, you know, and you're, in my mind, you know, you're God's creation, you have value as the creation and a soul, whether or not you produce a lot compared to the robot.
So Davis will get the last question.
Well, let's say I certainly, unfortunately, a student had to leave who had been hoping to ask for quite some time. But I'll just, one thing, in addressing about consciousness, okay, are machines conscious? And so you said, nope, that's taken care of because humans have a soul, are therefore conscious. Machines do not, they are not conscious. Takes care of the problem. But one of the, until of course God intervenes with an AI machine, but one of the other meanings of conscious is self-awareness. So are AIs, is it not possible that an AI entity could be self-aware? It seems to me that it very well could. Okay, what about that?
And again, I didn't want to get too far, but since you asked, there is, anybody heard this thing called the singularity? This concept of singularity? Okay, so there are serious people who talk about, I guess Werner Vinge was the first, Ray Kurzweil is probably the most influential now. He has a thing called the Singularity Institute. And he's now like the chief engineer at Google, chief philosophical advisor at Google. So he has a role. And he pretty clearly believes there is a singularity event coming when that happens. That all of history, back to the professor from UND, I forget your name, what's your first name? Lana, about technological determinism. He is a hard technological determinist. Kevin Carey, a hard technological determinist, that we are all here for the whole purpose to bring about this singularity event, which is the creation of AI with consciousness and superintelligence.
Self-awareness, is that what
everything? It becomes the super being, basically. And when that happens, you know, buckle the chin strap, okay? Because the way we structure society and everything else is now going to be radically transformed. I don't necessarily adhere to that. To me, the singularity is a series of them. hunters and gatherers, and they start to do farming, and the rise of Rome and Egypt. I mean, talk about a singularity event. The world was unrecognizable. Or our grandparents in rural North Dakota, and all of a sudden we have superhighways and jet airplanes, you know. I mean, to me, there's a series of these events which I've described as realms, and I see it as additive, that we don't go away, human-machine teaming doesn't go away, robots are on farms, we have cyberspace, and we all manage this thing. But there are some that said that will become the event. And at that event, we hope it has empathy for us, so it keeps us around, you know. And that's why the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, before they changed their name, was called the Singularity Institute. And their whole point is this moment is coming, of what you described, and we want it to be ethical when it comes along. That's their whole point. And these are serious people. These are Stanford professors and everybody else working on that issue. So you're exactly right. That is held by many people. I personally think we're going to have these 4 realms, and we're just going to have to manage this and try to, you know, always emphasize the positive and turn it over to our children and grandchildren in pretty good shape. But there's not going to be this event where we're all working for the AI government, you know. I don't subscribe to that, but other people would subscribe to what you said.
Well, I want us to thank our speaker. As good as we found it. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
So you had a question? Yeah. What's your name again? Oh, wonderful.
My thing is done. So all I need is just to turn it off.
Go ahead.
Let me give you my card. You can send it.
Yes.